Officer Bradley leaned back against his patrol car, arms crossed, laughing as 18-year-old Jamal Carter sat handcuffed on the curb. To him, it was just another routine arrest, one that he thought would never be questioned. But what he didn't realize was that his own arrogance had just sealed his fate. Inside the courtroom, a hidden camera would capture something so shocking that even the judge was left speechless. The entire department was about to be exposed, and the smirk on Bradley's face about to be wiped off permanently. This isn't just another case of abuse of power. This is the moment justice fights back. And trust me, you'll want to see how this one ends. It all started as a simple traffic stop, at least, that's what Officer Bradley claimed. But for Jamal Carter, a young black teen with no criminal record, it turned into a nightmare. Wrongfully accused, mistreated, and humiliated, he became another victim of racial profiling. The officer laughed, believing he was untouchable. But what he didn't know, the courtroom had a secret weapon, a video that would change everything. Stay tuned, because this case takes a turn no one saw coming. Jamal Carter was just trying to get home. It was a quiet evening, and he had just finished his shift at a local diner. As he drove through his neighborhood, he noticed flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. His stomach dropped. He had done nothing wrong, yet he knew that for someone like him, even a simple traffic stop could turn dangerous. Officer Bradley, a cop with a reputation for aggressive policing, stepped out of his squad car with a smirk. His body language was already hostile. "License and registration," he barked. Jamal, keeping his hands visible on the wheel, calmly responded, "Yes, sir," before slowly reaching for his wallet. But before he could even hand it over, Bradley's hand was already on his holster. "Step out of the car," the officer ordered. Confused, Jamal asked why. He wasn't speeding, he wasn't swerving, and his taillights were working fine. But Bradley wasn't interested in explanations. "I said, get out. Now," he shouted. Knowing how quickly situations like this could escalate, Jamal complied. The moment he stepped out, Bradley roughly grabbed his arm and shoved him against the car. "You fit the description of a suspect," he sneered. "A suspect?" Jamal's heart pounded. He was wearing his work uniform, a name tag still clipped to his shirt. He had nothing on him but his phone and wallet. As Bradley began patting him down, Jamal noticed something strange. His dashcam light wasn't blinking. It wasn't recording. Was this intentional? Before he could process it, Bradley suddenly grabbed his wrist and twisted it behind his back. "Resisting, huh?" Bradley chuckled. "That's another charge for you." Resisting? Jamal hadn't moved an inch. He barely had time to protest before he felt cold steel tighten around his wrists. Handcuffs. A few passers-by had stopped, pulling out their phones, recording the incident. One woman yelled, "He didn't do anything." But Bradley didn't care. He smirked at the cameras, as if daring them to question his authority. Moments later, another patrol car arrived, and a second officer stepped out. Instead of questioning the arrest, he simply nodded at Bradley, as if this was business as usual. Within minutes, Jamal was forced into the back of the squad car. His crime? Being in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong skin. But what Bradley didn't know was that one of the onlookers wasn't just filming. She was also making a phone call. A call that would set the wheels of justice in motion. Because while the police could turn off their cameras, they couldn't erase the truth. And this truth was about to come out in the most unexpected way. Jamal Carter had spent the night in a cold holding cell, confused, scared, and furious. His only crime? Existing in the wrong officer's path. By morning, he was told he'd be facing charges of resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and even suspicion of theft. Accusations that had no basis in reality. His public defender assured him that if he just pleaded guilty, the charges might be reduced. But Jamal refused. He knew he had done nothing wrong. What neither he nor Officer Bradley expected was that a crucial piece of evidence was about to surface, one that would change the entire case. By the time the trial began, the prosecution was confident. They had Officer Bradley's testimony, his written police report, and a handful of officers ready to back up his version of events. According to him, Jamal had acted suspiciously, refused to comply, and even tried to flee. He claimed the arrest was by the book. Jamal sat silently, fists clenched under the table. He knew the truth, but would anyone believe him? Then, just as the judge was about to proceed, Jamal's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we have new evidence." The courtroom fell silent. The prosecution exchanged confused glances. Officer Bradley's smirk faltered for the first time. "New evidence?" the judge asked, raising an eyebrow. The lawyer nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." A video taken by a bystander at the scene. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor scoffed. "We already have the officer's body cam footage." Jamal's lawyer didn't miss a beat. "Exactly. And yet, the footage we received from the department mysteriously cuts off at a crucial moment. However, an independent recording tells a different story." The judge leaned forward. "Let's see it." The room darkened as the bailiff set up a screen. The video began to play. It showed the exact moment Bradley pulled Jamal over. His aggressive stance. The way he reached for his gun before even giving Jamal a chance to comply. The way he yanked him out of the car without justification. Then, the part that made the entire courtroom gasp. The video captured audio that the police report failed to mention. Bradley laughing as he tightened the handcuffs, mocking Jamal. "You people never learn, do you?" The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, shocked expressions. The judge's eyes darkened. "Officer Bradley," he said, his voice low and firm. "Is this your voice?" Bradley's face turned pale. He hesitated. Your Honor, this is taken out of context." Jamal's lawyer pressed on. "Out of context? Because it sounds like you were enjoying this arrest a little too much?" The judge turned to the prosecution. "Was this video submitted as evidence?" The prosecutor swallowed hard. "No, Your Honor. We were not aware of it." The judge's glare shifted back to Bradley. "And yet, you were aware of your own body cam being off. Convenient, isn't it?" For the first time since the trial began, Officer Bradley looked nervous. The confidence, the arrogance, it all started to crumble, because he knew what was coming next. His lies had just been exposed, and the courtroom was about to turn against him in a way he never saw coming. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Officer Bradley sat stiffly in his seat, his face pale as the reality of the situation began to sink in. He had spent years manipulating reports, twisting the truth, and getting away with it. But this time was different. The video evidence was undeniable, and worse, it had exposed him in the most humiliating way possible. Jamal Carter, the teenager he had wrongfully arrested and mocked, sat just a few feet away, finally seeing the cracks in the officer's armor. His lawyer wasted no time pressing the advantage. "Officer Bradley," she said, standing tall and confident, "you wrote in your report that Jamal Carter was resisting arrest. Do you still stand by that statement?" Bradley cleared his throat, gripping the arms of his chair. "Yes," he muttered, though his voice lacked the same authority he once had. The lawyer nodded. "All right, let's break that down. You claim that Mr. Carter was aggressive, yet in the video, we can clearly see him complying with your orders. At what point, exactly, did he resist?" Bradley shifted uncomfortably. He hesitated. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Hesitated? He asked you why he was being pulled out of his car. That's not resisting, Officer Bradley. That's a question." The prosecutor attempted to object, but the judge raised a hand. "No, I want to hear this," he said, his tone sharp. The defense lawyer stepped closer. "Let's move on to another part of your report. You stated that you believed Mr. Carter matched the description of a suspect in a robbery. Can you describe that suspect for us?" Bradley hesitated again, his eyes darting around the room. "Male, black, around 18 to 25. The lawyer sighed and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the suspect description is so vague it could apply to hundreds of people in this city. There was no justifiable reason for this stop." The judge nodded but said nothing. His expression, however, was telling. He wasn't impressed with the officer's defense. Then came the final blow. The defense played the video again, this time zooming in on Bradley's expression as he tightened the cuffs. The smug smirk, the way he looked at Jamal like he was nothing. And then, his words echoed through the courtroom once more. "You people never learn, do you?" The air in the courtroom grew thick. The prosecution scrambled, but it was too late. The words had been spoken. The intent was clear. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. It was an abuse of power, fueled by prejudice. The judge leaned forward. "Officer Bradley, do you deny making this statement?" Bradley looked down, his jaw tight. He could feel the walls closing in. If he denied it, he'd be lying under oath. If he admitted it, he was done. Either way, his career was over. His silence spoke louder than any answer ever could. Then, in a move no one expected, the judge turned to the prosecutor. "Do you wish to continue pursuing charges against Mr. Carter?" The prosecutor hesitated, then shook his head. "No, Your Honor." And just like that, the case against Jamal Carter was dismissed. But the real case, the one against Officer Bradley, was just beginning. The courtroom was still buzzing as the judge dismissed the charges against Jamal Carter. But while the young man was finally free, Officer Bradley's troubles were far from over. His once unshakable confidence had crumbled, and now, all eyes were on him. Jamal's lawyer wasn't finished. "Your Honor," she said, turning back to the judge, "this case cannot end here. Officer Bradley's actions were not just unethical, they were criminal. He fabricated a police report, turned off his body cam, and engaged in racial profiling. This isn't just about one wrongful arrest. It's about a pattern of abuse." The judge nodded gravely. "I agree." At that moment, Bradley's superior officer, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, stood up and quietly left. Within minutes, Internal Affairs was notified, and the officer who once thought himself untouchable was now being investigated. The department turns on one of its own. Bradley had always believed he had the full support of the department. After all, he wasn't the first cop to make a questionable arrest, and he certainly wouldn't be the last. But something was different this time. The video had gone viral. News stations were already picking up the story. Social media was ablaze with outrage. Calls for his firing, and even his arrest, were growing louder. By the time Bradley returned to the precinct later that day, he was met with an icy reception. Some of his colleagues wouldn't even look him in the eye. Others whispered behind his back. He had become a liability. And then came the final blow. A high-ranking officer approached him with a grim expression. "Turn in your badge and gun," he ordered. "You're suspended pending investigation." Bradley's heart pounded. Suspended? He had expected some backlash, maybe a slap on the wrist. But this? "Your actions have put this department under scrutiny," the officer continued. "You were reckless, and now we're all paying for it." Bradley opened his mouth to argue, but one look at his superior's face told him it was useless. He had been abandoned. As he emptied his locker, the same arrogance that had once defined him was nowhere to be seen. For the first time, he felt powerless. Jamal Carter gets the last word. Meanwhile, Jamal Carter was no longer just another victim of police misconduct. He was a symbol of resistance. His lawyer filed a civil lawsuit against the police department, seeking damages for his wrongful arrest and emotional distress. The public outcry only made the case stronger. When reporters approached Jamal outside the courthouse, asking what he thought about Bradley's downfall, he didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he said something that left everyone speechless. "I never wanted revenge," Jamal said. "I just wanted justice. And now, maybe, cops like him will think twice before abusing their power." His words echoed across the country, forcing people to have difficult conversations about accountability in law enforcement. The verdict that changed everything. Months later, after an extensive investigation, Officer Bradley was officially charged with falsifying a police report and violating department policies. His smirk was gone when he returned to the same courtroom, but this time, he was the one in handcuffs. The judge didn't go easy on him. Bradley was found guilty and sentenced to time behind bars, along with losing his right to ever work in law enforcement again. For Jamal Carter, it wasn't just about his case. It was about every innocent person who had been wrongfully targeted before him. His fight wasn't just personal. It was part of a much bigger battle for justice. And thanks to one video, one courtroom, and one moment of undeniable truth, a crooked cop finally faced the consequences of his actions. Officer Bradley thought he was untouchable, laughing, mocking, and abusing his power without a second thought. But in the end, justice had the last laugh. One video, one courtroom, and one determined young man exposed the corruption hiding in plain sight. Jamal Carter walked free, his name cleared, while the officer who tried to ruin his life lost everything. This case was more than just an arrest. It was a wake-up call. Power unchecked is dangerous, but truth fights back. And this time it won. If you believe in holding people accountable, share this story. And don't forget to subscribe. We bring you real stories that need to be heard.